So now we're going to add the background. We've got our flapping bird, and I'm actually going to leave this as a little challenge for you because we've got all the code that we need there. So can you create the code to add the background? I hope you managed it. Something like var, let's call it BG. And as before, we want an SK sprite node. And then we just create a texture. So let's call it BG texture, which is an SK texture from image named, and its image bg.png. Then we create the background from that texture. So bg is sk sprite node texture and bg texture. So now we want to set the position of the background, and we'll use exactly the same code as before. So bg.position is the middle of the x and the middle of the y. One thing we do want to change is to stretch out the background so that it's the height of the device, whatever that might be. And we do that by saying bg.size.height is equal to self.frame.height. And now it's stretched out vertically. It's not stretched out horizontally. We're going to deal with horizontally slightly separately because we want this to repeat, which is something else that we need to do. But for now, we can just add that using the add child method as before, and then let's take a look. Now this works, but we get this slightly strange flashing bird, which is not the name of our app at all. It's Flappy Bird. So the easiest way to get rid of that is to add the background texture first. So I'm just going to copy and paste my code, or cut and paste my code, so that the background texture is added before the bird texture, and then the bird texture and bird texture 2 will be in front of that every time. Great, so now we have our background and we have our flapping bird. Great, so now let's get our background moving. We want it to move slowly to the left to give the illusion that the bird is actually moving to the right. And that's fairly easily done. We'll have a new action called moveBG, and that will be an SK action, and it's move by X that we want. Now I found that if we move 10 pixels to the left, so that's minus 10 pixels, we move nothing on the y-axis, and we do that every 0.1 seconds, that seems to work okay. But you can play around with these numbers depending on how fast you want everything to move. So if we run this, it will just move once, which isn't very useful to us. So we need to create a new action, move background forever, which is an SK action, repeat action forever, as we used before, and move BG is the one that we want to repeat forever. Okay, now we just add that to our background, so BG, run action, and move BG forever. Okay, so with any luck that'll work, but you've probably anticipated a problem that will come across quite quickly. It looks really good, it looks really good. Then we come to the end of the world and our Flappy Bird keeps flying into nothing. So we're going to need to repeat our background to stop that from happening. So how do we do that? Well, if we look at our background image, we can see that it's 900 pixels wide. So let's go back into our game scene.swift, and instead of moving it 10 pixels every 0.1 seconds, let's move it 900 pixels every 9 seconds. Now that should have exactly the same effect. If I've done my maths right, we've just multiplied both of those numbers by 9, so it should move at the same speed. Great. The difference is this will finish when it's moved 900 pixels. So that's exactly the moment at which we want to shift it back so that it can replace itself. So let's create another SK action. We'll call it replace background, which is going to be very similar, still a move by X, but this time it's going to move 900 in the positive direction, and it's going to do it in 0 seconds. So it's going to move immediately back to replace itself, essentially. So we're going to want to do these two SK actions in sequence forever. So let's do that in here. So we want to repeat an action forever, and the action we want to repeat is an SK action sequence. And the two actions that we want to repeat are move BG and replace BG. Great. Let's have a look and see what that does for us. So we can see the animation's working fine. We still get the end of the world though, but at some point it should come back for us. There we go. So obviously not quite perfect. That's not exactly how we want it to work, but we've got a step in the right direction at least. Before we fix that, let's just look at a couple of other little things that are worth turning our attention to now. Firstly, I don't quite like this -900 because if we suddenly decide that we want a different background that has different dimensions, that's going to break our app. So let's put that in programmatically rather than hard coding it in there. So instead of saying -900, we can say -BG texture dot size dot width, and that will give us the 900, and we can do the same thing there. So that should solve that problem. The other issue that we have is so far we've been running it in portrait mode. What happens if we run it in landscape mode? And just to make this really clear, I'm going to comment out our move background instructions so we can have a look and see where the image aligns itself in landscape mode. It aligns itself in the middle, which we don't actually want. We want it to align itself to the left. So how do we do that? You'll notice that this BG position is actually the position of the center of the image. So it's there, which is currently in the center of the page. So we actually want the center of the image to be, in our case, 450 pixels from the left. Because if in fact, let's just see it. If I just change this to 450, 450 being half of 900, of course. So if we make it 450 pixels from the left, and we can make it resize correctly, then that will actually make it align to the left, because the center of the image will be 450 pixels, or half the width of the image from the left. So have a think about that, if that doesn't make sense to you first time. But in terms of making this general for any size background image, we're going to want to, instead of having 450, have BG texture dot size dot width over 2. And then let's just run that and have another look. And we should find that that will still work. And that will now work on any screen size as well. So if we're running this on an iPad, this will still align it to the left. So that's fixed that problem. But we still have our issue with the world ending at the right of our background. So we're going to need to repeat this background. We're going to need to have more than one of this background. How many are we going to need? Well, we could work that out programmatically, but that's a little bit complicated. So to keep things simple, I'm just going to say that our image, as we've noticed, is 900 pixels. The widest iPad in landscape is 2048 pixels. So if we have 3 of our images, that covers us. And we will then have to release a new version of our app if Apple releases a device with more than 2700 pixels. So you either might want to go for 4 or do some calculation for working out the dimension of the image versus the dimension of the screen. Up to you. But for now, I'm just going to go for 3 to keep things fairly simple. So let's do this with a for loop. So for I is 0, I is less than 3, I plus plus. And sorry, those were semicolons. So this is going to be repeated 3 times, once with I is 0, and once with I is 1, once with I is 2, and I think we need to define I as well there. So we want to do all of this. So let's bring our animation in there. And therefore we're going to want to not define these several times, but in fact these are the same for all 3 of the background textures that we're going to add. So we can define them at the start. We don't have to redefine them every time. So what are the differences between the 3? Well, the first one's going to be on the left, which as we know is there. The second one is going to be 900 pixels to the right of that. So very simply that would be plus 900. But we need to do this in a loop because we want to be able to extend it to adding more backgrounds easily if we want to. So we could just say 900 times I. So when I is 0, then this won't have any value at all. So it will just be on the left. And then when I is 1, it's going to be 900 pixels to the right, which is what we want. When I is 2, it'll be 2 lots of 900 pixels to the right, etc. So that's what we want. We've got a typing error here because this is an integer and this is a CG float. So let's just define I to be a CG float, and that will save our error from combining those two. And of course, we don't want to say 900 because that may change. We want to say bg texture dot size dot width, and then multiply that by I. Great. So now they've all got the same features, but they've got a different location each time. So we should have 3 backgrounds all in a row extending off the screen. All right, so that should do it. Let's run it and have a look. So we're looking good there. We haven't come to the end yet. Fantastic. This is looking very promising. Let's just rotate it and check. It's looking good in landscape mode too. Fantastic. Okay, I'm pretty confident that that is indeed going to go on forever. I won't keep this video going to show you, but you can definitely try it out as long as you like on your code. Great, so we're making good progress. In the next video, we'll see how to control the bird and make him move up and down.